Every step toward forever. They lost each other once, but forever was still waiting. You first met Alisha and Kenji in Unfinished Vows, but their story is far from over. Come visit us at Pearline Love Jones and witness how their journey began. Every Step Toward Forever is a gripping second-chance romance, packed with longing, emotional tension, and the hope of forgiveness. Follow Kenji and Alisha as they navigate heartbreak and danger, searching for healing, and a love that's both passionate and tender. This story isn't just about romance. It's about the courage to choose love again, even when the odds are stacked against you. If you're craving drama, devotion, and a satisfying happily ever after, you won't want to miss this journey. Subscribe now, and dive into the world of Kenji and Alisha. Their story will keep you hooked, and you'll be cheering for them every step of the way. The hospital call. "Oh my God, the baby is coming!" Alisha yelled into the phone, scrambling to scoop up her shoes and keys. She and Iris had been best friends since they were teenagers. They had weathered every milestone, every heartbreak, every triumph, and all the unpredictable curves life loved to throw. Through it all, they had held each other down. When Iris and Terrence decided to remarry, Alisha was their biggest cheerleader, and now that their first child was finally arriving, she couldn't be happier. But as she reached for the doorknob, she paused. He would be there. Kenji McFadden. Of course he would be. He and Terrence were best friends, and Kenji was the godfather. Alisha closed her eyes, took a deep breath to steady her racing heart, and jetted out the door. By the time she reached the hospital, Kenji was already pacing the waiting room. When she burst through the doors, his breath caught in his chest. Even in her haphazard, rushed appearance, she was stunning. It had been a year since they had broken up, and although they had promised to be friends, they had instead perfected the art of avoiding each other, without seeming to avoid each other. Even now, Kenji still could not pinpoint exactly what had caused the breakup. All he could remember was that one moment they were planning a wedding, and the next he was packing his things from her condo and trying to look completely unbothered whenever they ran into each other. This was another one of those occasions when he put on that good-to-see-you smile and prayed that his voice would not reveal the complete chaos seeing her caused inside him. Alisha's eyes locked onto his. Kenji tried to still his posture as she offered a soft, somewhat distant smile. "Hello," she said. He stood and moved toward her, pulling her into a quick hug. "Hello," he replied, letting his eyes linger just a second too long on her lips. Alisha noticed. She smiled and did that one specific thing that always sent shockwaves straight through him. She let her gaze slowly sweep over him from head to toe, as if offering an unspoken invitation. Or maybe he was just projecting. "You look good," Kenji managed. Alisha looked down at her disheveled clothes, gave a short snort, and laughed. "You're being kind, but thanks anyway." Giving him one last up-and-down glance, she turned and headed toward the nursing station. Kenji just stood there, staring after her like a lost puppy. "Good morning, I'm Alisha Majette," she told the desk. "I'm here for Iris and Terrence Blackman." "Oh yes. Come with me," replied the night nurse, a woman with a kind face but a serious, efficient demeanor. Alisha glanced back over her shoulder. Kenji was still standing in the exact same spot, watching her. She flashed him a quick smile and followed the nurse into the back. At 4:57 a.m., her beautiful, loud, and already very opinionated goddaughter entered the world. Becoming godparents. After the initial whirlwind, Alisha walked back out to the waiting room to find Kenji fast asleep in an uncomfortable-looking chair. She nudged him awake to deliver the news. They were officially godparents. In the sudden excitement, they wrapped their arms around each other. The electric current between them was instant and undeniable. Alisha pulled back abruptly. Sensing the shift, Kenji quickly shoved his hands into his pockets and cleared his throat, asking about the proud parents. Just then, Terrence walked through the double doors, beaming with pride. "She is so beautiful," Terrence said, his voice thick with emotion. He extended a hand to Kenji, who bypassed the handshake and pulled him into a fierce, brotherly embrace. "Congrats, man," Kenji said, genuinely thrilled for his friend. Months later. Several months had passed since that morning at the hospital, and neither Kenji nor Alisha had been able to shake the other from their mind. Alisha was currently dating some accountant, a fact that bothered Kenji much more than he cared to admit. Every time he tried to dismiss the thought of another man touching her, the mental image burrowed deep into his psyche like a scabies mite under the skin. He knew he didn't have a right to feel this way. He had Paris after all. Paris was sweet, smart, and objectively ideal for him, but despite how perfect things looked on paper, Kenji could not shake the ghost of Alisha. Just the mere thought of her caused his chest to tighten. It's over. You've both moved on, Kenji reminded himself, staring blankly at the wall. Deal with it, man. Alisha was doing no better in her attempts to dislodge Kenji from her mind. She could still feel the lingering warmth of his arms, catch the faint memory of cedar and soap, and remember how instantly her body had reacted to his touch during that brief hospital hug. She needed to get him out of her system. It had been a whole year, yet he could still upend her entire world just by walking into a room. She was with Alonso now. Not Kenji, Alonso. But her brain stubbornly struggled with that fact, constantly looping back to her ex. Alisha was slowly realizing this was going to be a massive problem. A walk with Iris. Miss Ma'am, are you just going to keep walking past the house? Iris asked. Huh? What? Alisha blinked, snapped out of her thoughts. You're walking past the house again, Iris said, pulling the stroller to a stop. Oh, yeah. I just thought you wanted to take one more lap around the block, Alisha said sheepishly. You did, huh? Iris eyed her friend with deep suspicion. Okay, girl, spill. Spill what? Alisha deflected. Don't play with me. I just gave birth to an 8-pound child, whose head was the size of a bowling ball, and I haven't slept more than 3 hours at a time in weeks. I don't have the energy for games. Like I said, spill, Iris demanded firmly, though the growing smirk on her face betrayed her amusement. There is nothing to spill. Just work stuff, that's all. Nothing dramatic, Alisha muttered. She quickly bent down to adjust the blanket over her goddaughter, desperately hoping to avoid the laser focus of her best friend, who could read her like an open book. Work stuff, Iris repeated, her suspicion shifting into full alert. Would this, work stuff? Iris raised her hands, using air quotes to emphasize her skepticism. Happened to be about 6 feet tall, with an ebony complexion and a devilish smile that sends heat waves straight through you. Alisha felt a sudden blush creep up her neck at the vivid image. Defensively, she snapped. Girl, ain't nobody thinking about Kenji. Iris stopped dead in her tracks in the middle of the sidewalk. Who said Kenji's name? Not me, I was talking about Alonso. But look at who is actually on your mind. Realizing she had walked right into a trap, Alisha groaned, giving Iris an exhausted glare before hurrying up the walkway toward the front door. Iris trailed right behind her, laughing. Just for the record, Kenji is 6'4", golden bronze, and has that dark, brooding aura about him. You might want to write that down so you don't confuse the two again. Iris's smirk erupted into a full, booming laugh. Alisha carefully unbuckled the sleeping baby, carried her inside, and placed her gently in the playpen. She made a dramatic point of completely ignoring Iris, which only made her best friend laugh harder. Carrington's first birthday. The celebration for little Carrington Elise's first birthday was in full swing, but the guest of honor was completely oblivious to the tension surrounding her. As the little girl focused all her attention on the empty cardboard boxes and crumpled wrapping paper, the adults around her were working overtime to ignore the elephant in the room. Alonso was the first to really tune into it. He had caught the stolen glances between Kenji and Alisha. He noticed how they both made a deliberate point to look anywhere but at each other, which ironically made it all the more obvious just how hyper-aware they were of one another's presence. On the other side of the room, Paris was tracking her own set of red flags. She noticed how Kenji was overcompensating, being overly attentive to her and speaking just a little louder than normal. His entire body went rigid every single time Alonso stepped close to Alisha. Paris also caught Alisha watching her from across the room, not in a hostile way, but simply acknowledging her presence, gauging where she stood. From the kitchen island, Terence and Iris exchanged a knowing, heavy look. The silent signal was clear. It was officially time for them to interfere and help their friends see what was standing right in front of them. I'm not feeling very well. I think I'd like to leave, Paris quietly told Kenji, cutting through his forced chatter. Kenji's eyes instinctively drifted back toward the couch, catching Alonso and Alisha wrapped up in an intimate conversation. He pulled his focus back to Paris, clearing his throat. Sure, let me go let Terence know we're heading out. Alisha watched from the corner of her eye as Kenji walked into the kitchen. She quickly glanced over at Paris and tried to seamlessly resume her conversation with Alonso, but she wasn't fast enough. Paris caught the fleeting expression that crossed Alicia's face before she had a chance to hide it. It was the devastating, unmistakable look of a woman realizing she was still entirely in love with someone she thought she was done with. Iris saw it too. A small, knowing smile tugged at the corner of her lips. Alisha caught her best friend's expression and closed her eyes for a brief second. She knew Iris had just figured out exactly what Alisha had finally admitted to herself. She was still hopelessly, desperately in love with Kenji. Just like she had predicted a year ago on that sidewalk, this was going to be a massive problem. The ride home. The ride back to Paris's house was dead silent. Not the comfortable kind, but the heavy, suffocating silence that rolls in just before a storm. Paris watched Kenji from the passenger seat. His jaw was tightly clenched, his knuckles taut as both hands gripped the steering wheel. "Is there anything wrong?" she asked. "Huh, no. Kenji blinked, pulling his eyes from the road for a fraction of a second. "How are you feeling? Is there anything I need to get you?" "No, I think I just need to get some rest," she said, her voice flat. "Yeah," he replied, his mind clearly elsewhere. "Are you staying over?" Paris asked. "Huh? No, I'm going to let you get some rest. Besides, I've got some work to finish up, so I'll call you later to check on you," he said, the promise sounding like an afterthought. They pulled up to Paris's place. Kenji got out, walked her up the path, and waited as she unlocked the door. As he turned to leave, Paris spoke without thinking, the words tearing from her throat. "You still love her, don't you?" Kenji froze. The stillness lasted so long that Paris thought he wasn't going to address it at all. "Why would you ask me that?" he finally said, still refusing to face her. A faint, painful smile touched Paris's lips, her voice shaking. "Not a no, not an of course not. Just, why would you ask me that? In case you didn't realize it, Kenji, your inability or unwillingness to answer me is my answer. But I need you to turn around and look at me. Do you still love her?" Her breath caught in her throat, waiting. Kenji finally turned, unsure of where to place his gaze. Avoidant, he stared down at the porch floorboards. "I am with you," Paris laughed, a high-pitched, angry sound that cut through the night air. "But you are in love with her." She allowed each word to fill the empty spaces between them. He took a step toward her, his voice a quiet plea. "Paris, I am committed to you. I am with you, not her." He closed the physical gap, but left enough distance to try and hide the frantic emotional war building inside his chest. "You still have not answered my question. Kenji, do you still love her?" He made a move toward her. "Stop," she said, her voice inflamed and bleeding with hurt. He stopped. "I don't know," he whispered, his voice so low she had to lean in slightly to catch it. "You don't know," she repeated, devastated. "So what have we been doing all this time?" "No, not we. What have you been doing all this time? Playing boyfriend and girlfriend with me, hoping it would help you get over her?" Kenji winced at the anger in her voice, feeling the sharp sting of the truth in her words. "No, Paris, I do care about you." She cut him off instantly. "You care. Now it's, you care. Last night, last week, last month, it was love. Today, here, right now, it's I care." Tears finally spilled over her cheeks. He wanted to step forward and comfort her, but the sheer volume of hurt in her eyes paralyzed him. "Kenji, leave," she said softly, the fight leaving her body. "Just leave." He stood there for a painful second. Paris turned, stepped inside, and closed the door behind her. Slowly, Kenji turned around and walked back to his car, completely haunted by the wreckage of the hurt he had just caused. Alisha finds out. The following evening, Alisha was sitting at Iris's kitchen island, mindlessly stirring a cup of tea she hadn't touched. The house was quiet for once, with little Carrington finally down for a nap, and Terence out running errands. Iris walked into the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her expression unusually solemn. She didn't sit down across from Alisha. Instead, she leaned against the counter, locking her eyes onto her best friend. "Kenji and Paris broke up last night," Iris said, delivering the news without a drop of preamble. Alisha's hand froze mid-stir. The spoon clinked sharply against the side of the ceramic mug. She forced her fingers to relax, looking up and trying to plaster on an expression of casual, polite concern. "Oh, really? That's too bad. They seemed really good together." "Alisha, stop it," Iris snapped gently, throwing the dish towel onto the counter. "Do not do that face with me." I was there yesterday at the party. I saw the way you two were breathing the same air and vibrating on a whole different frequency. Paris saw it too, which is exactly why she ended it. Iris, I don't know what you want me to say, Alisha countered, her voice rising in defense. It's a shame about them, but it has nothing to do with me. I'm with Alonso. Kenji is my past, Alonso is my present. Are you trying to convince me, or yourself? Iris stepped closer, leaning over the island. Because from where I'm sitting, your present looks like a placeholder. You are still hopelessly, completely in love with Kenji McFadden, and it's time to stop pretending otherwise. I am not in love with him, Alisha protested, slamming the spoon down. But the lie felt heavy and clumsy in her mouth. She looked at Iris's entirely unimpressed face, and the armor she'd been wearing for a year finally began to crack. Alisha dropped her head into her hands, letting out a ragged sigh. Iris, I try. You don't understand how hard I try. Talk to me, Iris said, her tones softening as she took the stool next to her. I can't get him out of my mind, Alisha whispered, staring down at her lap. It's been a whole year, and it doesn't matter what I do. I close my eyes and I still feel the warmth of his arms. I can still smell him. When he walked into that waiting room at the hospital, my entire body reacted before my brain could even process he was there. I want to be over it. I need to be over it. But he upends my entire world just by breathing in the same room. She looked up at Iris, her eyes shining with unshed tears. But I have Alonso. Alonso is sweet. He's steady. He treats me like I'm the only woman in the world. I am trying to build something real with him. And that is exactly why you need to let that man go, Iris said firmly, reaching out to cover Alicia's hand with her own. Alisha, you are stringing Alonso along. I'm not stringing him along. I care about him. Caring about someone isn't enough when you're keeping your heart locked in a drawer for another man, Iris interrupted. It's not fair to him. Alonso isn't blind. He was at the party yesterday too. He noticed the stolen glances. He noticed how hard you were trying to look like you weren't looking. It is completely obvious to anyone with eyes that you still love Kenji, and deep down, Alonso knows it. He knows he's competing with a ghost, and he knows he's losing. Alisha let out a shaky breath, a single tear escaping and rolling down her cheek. The truth of Iris's words cut straight through her defenses. You're running on borrowed time, Alisha, Iris said softly, squeezing her hand. You thought Kenji being unavailable was your safety net, but that net is gone now. You have to face this. Terrence calls Kenji out. Kenji stared out the window of Terrence's garage, a half-empty beer sweating in his hand. The steady thrum of late afternoon traffic did nothing to quiet the noise inside his own head. Terrence tossed a wrench onto his workbench with a loud clatter, and wiped his grease-stained hands on a rag. He looked over at his best friend, taking in Kenji's slouched shoulders and exhausted posture. You've been staring at that same spot on the driveway for 20 minutes, man, Terrence said, pulling up a plastic lawn chair. You want to talk about what happened with Paris, or are you just gonna drink my beer and suffer in silence? Kenji let out a heavy sigh, finally looking up. I messed up, T. I really did. Paris is a good woman. She's sweet, she's smart, she did everything right. He shook his head, looking down at the label on his bottle. I tried. I swear to God I tried to make it work. I cared about her. I really did. But, Terrence prompted gently. But she wasn't Alisha, Kenji admitted, the confession sounding raw and painful as it left his mouth. Every time I held her, every time we talked about the future, there was this wall. I thought if I just gave it more time, if I forced myself to be more attentive, the feeling would come. But it didn't. Paris saw right through me at the party yesterday. She asked me straight up if I still loved Alisha, and I couldn't even look her in the eye and say no. Kenji took a long swallow of his beer, his jaw tightening. I don't know what else to do, man. I feel like a monster for hurting her, but I couldn't keep lying to her face. Terrence leaned back, folding his arms. Look, it sucks that Paris got hurt. But you can't force a puzzle piece to fit where it doesn't belong. You've been running from the truth for a whole year, Kenji. You and Alisha broke up, but neither one of you ever actually walked away. It doesn't matter anymore, Kenji muttered. Like the devil it doesn't, Terrence countered. You need to go talk to Alisha. You need to sit her down and tell her exactly how you feel. Kenji let out a strident, cynical laugh and shook his head rapidly. Man, are you crazy? I can't do that. She's with Alonso. Kenji. No, T, listen to me, Kenji interrupted, his voice rising with a mix of frustration and panic. Alonso is a good guy. He treats her right, she's trying to move on with her life, and I am not trying to pull up and start no drama. I already wrecked one relationship this weekend. I'm not about to go crash hers just because I can't get my mind right. At Alisha's door. Forgetting every word of his own warning to Terence earlier that day, Kenji found himself standing at Alisha's door. Before his brain could override his feet, he knocked. When the door swung open, Alisha felt the air leave her lungs so fast, she thought she might collapse. She gripped the brass door handle so tightly, her knuckles ached as her words lodged firmly in her throat. Kenji stood there, looking just as wrecked as she felt. "Hi!" He rushed out, the syllables colliding as his nerves completely took over. "Are you busy? Can we talk?" I should have called. I'm sorry. I'll just come back later." "No," Alisha interrupted, her voice laced with panic at the mere thought of him turning around and leaving. "Come in." She stepped back, letting him pass. The tension in the entryway was thick enough to suffocate. "Can I get you something to drink?" she asked, turning around to face him. She didn't get the words out. Kenji was already standing right there, entirely too close. His eyes were fixated on her mouth, dark and intense, and without warning he leaned in and kissed her. Alisha didn't pull away. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back, raw, hungry, and entirely without apology. It wasn't just a kiss, it was like oxygen, and they were both desperately trying to inhale after drowning for a year. Alisha let out a soft, involuntary moan against his lips, and Kenji's whole body reacted to the sound. He pulled her flush against his chest, gripping her waist tighter, as if he were trying to fuse their two bodies back into one. Sensing that his final threads of restraint were about to snap completely, Kenji forced himself to pull back. Alisha whimpered in protest, reaching for him, but he held her at arm's length. "I miss you," he breathed, his voice a husky, raw rumble that vibrated through her. "I love you, Alisha. I don't want to complicate your life. I needed to see you, to touch you, to hold you." Alisha was fighting a losing battle to focus on his words. The sheer warmth of his body and the smell of his skin had completely demolished her senses, scattering her defenses to the wind. "Alisha," Kenji said, his eyes filled with a painful conflict. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have come here. I know you have someone else in your life now. I swore to myself I wouldn't cause any problems for you, that I would just let you move on." As if the universe had been waiting for the cue to shatter the moment, Alicia's phone began to vibrate loudly on the entryway table. The screen lit up. It was Alonzo. Alisha froze, the reality of her life crashing back into the room. She looked from the flashing screen back to Kenji, her chest heaving. I need to take this," she whispered. Kenji looked at the phone, then back at her, his face falling as the adrenaline drained away. He gave her a weak, understanding smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah?" he said quietly, backing toward the door. "Take it. I'll get out of your way." Alisha reached for the phone before she could talk herself out of it. Her fingers trembled against the screen as she answered, and turned slightly away from Kenji, even though she could still feel him behind her like heat from an open flame. "Hey," she said, trying to make her voice sound normal. "Hey, beautiful," Alonzo replied warmly. "I was just checking on you. You sounded a little off earlier today." Alisha closed her eyes. Beautiful. The word should have settled softly over her, but instead, it collided with the memory of Kenji's mouth on hers, the weight of his hands at her waist, the raw confession still hanging in the air between them. "I'm okay," she said quickly, too quickly. Across the entryway, Kenji had stopped moving. He was standing near the living room doorway now, one hand braced against the frame, watching her with uncertainty etched into every line of his face. He looked like a man who wanted to leave because he knew he should, but could not make himself abandon the moment completely. "Alisha?" Alonzo's voice sharpened with concern. "You still there?" She blinked hard and turned toward the hallway, as if putting a wall between herself and Kenji would help her remember how to breathe. "Yeah, I'm here, sorry." "What's going on?" Alonzo asked gently. "And don't tell me nothing, because I can hear it in your voice. Something's wrong." Alisha swallowed against the knot rising in her throat. She wanted to tell him the truth. He deserved that. He deserved more than half answers and delayed honesty. But not like this. Not over the phone while the man she had just kissed was standing 10 feet away in her living room, looking like he had handed her his whole heart, and was waiting to see if she would give it back. "I'm just tired," she said, forcing the words out. "It's been a long day." There was a pause on the other end, long enough for guilt to press hard against her ribs. "Okay," Alonso said slowly, though he did not sound convinced. "Do you want me to come over?" "No," Alisha answered, then softened her tone when she heard how abrupt it sounded. "No, I'm sorry. I just need to rest. But can we meet for dinner tomorrow? There's something I want to talk to you about." "Dinner tomorrow," Alonso repeated, quieter now. "Yeah. Of course." Alisha could hear the questions he was not asking. She could hear him trying to give her space, while bracing himself for whatever was coming. "Thank you," she whispered. "Alisha," Alonso said before she could end the call. She tightened her grip on the phone. "Yeah?" "Whatever it is," he said carefully. "I hope you know you can just tell me." Her eyes stung. "I know." After they said goodbye, Alonso sat with the phone still pressed to his ear for several seconds, listening to the silence that replaced her voice. Something was wrong. He could feel it in the spaces between her words, in the way she had rushed him off the phone, in the careful politeness of her request for dinner. He did not know what had changed, but he knew Alisha was already somewhere he could not reach. Alisha lowered the phone slowly, her reflection catching in the dark screen. For a moment she stayed in the hallway, letting the quiet gather around her. Then she turned and walked back into the living room. Kenji was still standing by the door. He looked uncertain, almost afraid to speak, his eyes searching her face for a sign of what the phone call had meant. Alisha stopped a few feet away from him and folded her arms around herself. "I'm meeting Alonso for dinner tomorrow," she said. Kenji's jaw tightened, but he nodded once. "Okay. I owe him the courtesy of ending it in person," she continued. Relief flickered through Kenji's eyes before he could hide it. It was small, brief, almost ashamed of itself, but Alisha saw it. "Don't," she said softly. His expression shifted. "Don't what?" "Don't look relieved like this means I'm choosing you tonight." Her voice trembled, but she held his gaze. "I am not ending things with Alonso because I'm ready to start something with you." Kenji absorbed that like a blow, but he did not interrupt. Alisha took a shaky breath. "I'm ending it because while I'm standing here trying to work through all the confusion in my head, Alonso does not need to be in a holding pattern. He deserves to be with someone who chooses him without hesitation." Her eyes dropped to Kenji's mouth and the air between them tightened instantly. "And the fact that I am standing in this room with you," she whispered, "fighting the urge to kiss you again and fighting everything that kiss could lead to, is proof that I am not that person for him." "Until morning." Kenji lowered his gaze, the relief fading into something quieter and more careful. "I hear you," he said, "and I don't want to be the reason you hurt him. I don't want to be the reason you question your own integrity." Alisha looked away, because the tenderness in his voice made her want to step closer, not farther away. "Then we have to be honest about what happened between us," she said. "Not just tonight, all of it." They moved from the entryway into the living room. Choosing opposite ends of the sofa-like distance could protect them from the truth. Outside, the neighborhood settled into silence. Inside, they finally said the things they had both swallowed for a year. "I thought you stopped wanting me," Alisha admitted, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Toward the end, you were always working, always tired, always somewhere else in your head. I kept asking myself what I had done wrong." Kenji's face tightened with regret. "You didn't do anything wrong. I was scared. We were talking about forever, and instead of telling you I was overwhelmed, I pulled back. I made you feel unwanted, because I didn't know how to say I was terrified of messing up the best thing that ever happened to me." Alisha blinked back tears. "And I punished you for pulling away. I stopped asking questions. I started acting like I didn't need you, like I was fine, like I could walk away first before you had the chance to leave me." "I never wanted to leave you," Kenji said, his voice rough. "But I watched you build a wall, and instead of fighting for you, I let my pride talk me into packing a bag." The conversation stretched deep into the night. They talked about the wedding plans that had become pressure instead of joy, the arguments that had never been about what they claimed to be about, and the loneliness both of them had carried while sleeping beside each other. By the time the first grey light of morning began pressing against the windows, they were exhausted, honest, and still sitting apart. Kenji rubbed both hands over his face. As much as I want to stay in this room with you and pretend nothing else exists, we can't do that. Alisha nodded slowly. I have to end things with Alonso first. Officially. Cleanly. Before we even think about exploring whatever this is between us. Whatever this is? Kenji asked softly. Her mouth trembled into the faintest smile. Don't push your luck. Kenji stood, but neither of them moved toward the door right away. The space between them pulsed with all the things they were choosing not to do. Finally, Alisha walked him to the entryway. Go home, she whispered. Kenji looked down at her, tired and tender. Call me after dinner? I will. He leaned forward like he might kiss her forehead, then stopped himself. Instead, he gave a small nod, opened the door, and stepped into the early morning air. Alonso sees Kenji leave. Across the parking lot, Alonso sat behind the wheel of his car, with his hands locked around the steering wheel. He had been there for nearly 20 minutes, feeling foolish, ashamed, and unable to make himself leave. He had told himself he only wanted to make sure she was okay. He had told himself he was not spying, that he was not the kind of man who sat outside a woman's home because his gut would not let him rest. But the longer he waited, the more conflicted he became. Every second made him feel smaller. Then, Alisha's front door opened. Alonso sat up straight as Kenji stepped out into the morning light. For a moment, Alonso could not move. His mind rushed to fill in every blank, each imagined answer worse than the last. The careful phone call, her strange voice, the request for dinner, the way she had said there was something she needed to talk about. It all snapped together in his head with brutal clarity. By the time Kenji reached his car and drove away, Alonso's shame had burned into anger. He got out of the car and crossed the parking lot with hard, furious strides. When Alisha opened the door, surprise flashed across her face. Alonso, she said, what are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing, he snapped, stepping inside before she invited him. Or maybe I should ask why Kenji McFadden is walking out of your house at sunrise. Alisha's expression tightened. You were sitting outside my house. Don't turn this around on me. Alonso's voice rose. I knew something was wrong last night. I knew you were lying to me, and now I see him leaving your place like he belongs here. Lower your voice, Alisha warned. No, I'm not lowering anything, he said, anger flashing across his face. You had me out here looking like a fool while you were entertaining your ex. Alisha drew herself up, hurt and anger mixing in her eyes. Nothing happened between us, Alonso laughed bitterly. Nothing happened? He spent the night, Alisha. We talked, she said firmly. That is all, and I was going to tell you the truth at dinner because I owed you that conversation in person. You owed me honesty before you let another man stay in your house all night, Alonso shot back. How long has this been going on? How long have I been the idiot standing beside you while you were sleeping with him behind my back? Alisha's mouth fell open. Do not talk to me like that. Like what? He demanded. Like the man you played for a fool? Enough. Her voice cut through the room, sharp and steady. You are angry, and you have a right to be hurt. But you do not have the right to come into my home, yell at me, accuse me, and disrespect me. Alonso's chest rose and fell with hard breaths. So that's it. You humiliate me, and now you want to act offended? Alisha walked to the door and opened it wide. Get out! He glared at her, seething, betrayal and rage twisting his face. He walked towards the door, stopped mere inches from her, his eyes dark and narrow, his mouth tight, his breathing heavy. He placed his hand around her throat, pushing her against the wall with one motion. You can tell Kenji this isn't over, he said, through clenched teeth. Get out, Alisha repeated quieter, fighting not to show the fear building up in her, which made her words sound like a plea instead of a command. Alonso sneered, released her and stepped past her and into the hallway, but he looked back once more. I hope he will be worth it. Alisha shut the door with trembling hands and locked it. Her hand instinctively moved to her throat, where she still felt the faint pressure of his hand. Only then did she allow herself to breathe. For a few seconds, she stood completely still, listening to the sound of Alonso's footsteps fade. Then she grabbed her phone and called Kenji. He answered on the second ring. Alisha? Kenji, be careful, she said, her voice shaking despite her effort to control it. Alonso was here. He saw you leave, and he thinks we've been sleeping together. He was furious. Kenji went quiet. Did he hurt you? No, she said quickly. Nothing I can't handle, but he threatened you before he left. I just need you to be careful. She hesitated to tell him about Kenji putting his hands around her throat, fearing what he might do if she did. Kenji's voice hardened, protective and controlled. Lock your door. I'm turning around. Kenji, no. You don't have to come back, I am going to be okay. He exhaled hard into the phone. Then promise me you'll call Iris or Terrence, and not sit there alone pretending you're fine. Alisha pressed a hand to her chest, trying to slow her racing heart. I promise. But when the call ended, Kenji gripped the wheel while anger and fear battled inside him. The thought of Alonzo directing his anger towards Alisha fueled his anger. He called Terrence. Back in her living room, Alisha stood by the door, momentarily trying to process the last few moments of her life. Then, an echo of a conversation she and Iris had after introducing her to Alonzo. You don't like him, do you? Alisha remembered asking Iris. No, it's not that I don't like him, her friend had assured her. Then what? Alisha had questioned. I don't know, Iris had replied. It's something right under the surface. I can't quite put my finger on it. Something like what? Alisha probed further. Iris paused, as if searching for the right words. He seems... She hesitated again. Performative. The warmth never reaching his eyes. Like he's wearing a mask. Iris continued. But don't mind me. She added quickly. I'm just being overly protective of my sister. She paused once more, her voice quiet but firm. Alisha, be careful. Pay attention to actions, to your instincts. I don't know what it is, but there's something there. Just be careful. She finished with a flat, serious smile. Now, Alisha understood. Her friend had seen something dark all those months ago, a darkness that had just revealed itself right here in her living room. Protective lines. Alisha kept her promise. Before she could talk herself out of it or convince herself she was overreacting, she called Iris. Iris answered on the third ring, her voice groggy but alert the moment she heard Alisha breathe. What happened? That was all it took. The story poured out of Alisha in broken pieces. Kenji coming over, the kiss, the late-night conversation, Alonzo sitting in the parking lot, and the ugly confrontation that followed. By the time she finished, Iris was fully awake and furious. Pack a bag, Iris said, no hesitation in her voice. Alisha blinked. Iris. Don't iris me. Iris's voice sharpened with the kind of authority that left no room for debate. You are coming over here for a few days until Alonzo cools down. I don't care if you think he meant it or not. He was angry enough to threaten Kenji, and he came into your home yelling at you. You are not staying there alone. Alisha pressed her fingers to her forehead. I don't want to drag you and Terrence into this. Too late, Iris said. We've been in this since the hospital waiting room, whether y'all wanted to admit it or not. Now get dressed, pack enough for a few days, and I'm sending Terrence to come get you if you don't start moving. Despite everything, a weak laugh escaped Alisha. You are so bossy. And alive. Which is what we are keeping you, Iris shot back. Then her tone softened. I love you, come over. Alisha swallowed past the lump in her throat. I love you too, I'll be there soon. Across town, Kenji did not drive home. He pulled into a gas station parking lot, put the car in park, and called Terrence. Terrence answered with a cautious, What's wrong? I need you to keep an eye on Alisha, Kenji said, skipping every greeting. Alonzo showed up at her place after I left. He saw me leaving and lost it. Terrence went quiet. Back up. You left Alisha's place this morning? Kenji dragged a hand down his face. Yeah. The same Alisha's place you told me you were not going to pull up to because you were not trying to cause drama? Terrence asked. Kenji sighed. Not now. Oh, it is definitely now, Terrence said, though there was humor under the concern in his voice. Because when this is over, you and I are going to have a whole conversation about how you said, and I quote, I am not about to go crash her relationship, and then apparently drove straight over there with a match and a gas can. Despite himself, Kenji almost laughed. It wasn't like that. I'm sure it was poetic and emotionally complicated, Terrence said dryly. Still drama. Kenji's brief amusement faded. He threatened me, T. She said he was furious. I don't know what he'll do, but I need to know she's not alone. Terrence's tone shifted immediately. She won't be. Iris already has her coming over here. I got you, man, she is going to be okay. Besides, if he shows up, he is going to have to deal with Iris, and we both know nobody wants that smoke, Terrence said with pure amusement. Kenji could not help but laugh out loud. You are right about that, he agreed. Kenji exhaled, but the relief did not settle. Good, thank you. And Kenji? Terrence added. Yeah? Do not come over here acting like somebody's action hero. We are keeping everybody calm today. Kenji looked out through the windshield, jaw tight. I hear you. Hearing me and listening to me are not always the same thing with you, Terrence replied. But I'm choosing optimism. Kenji ended the call a few minutes later and sat there for another moment, trying to do what Terrence asked. Trying to be calm. Trying not to imagine Alonso's anger pointed in Alisha's direction again. He failed. By the time Alisha arrived at Iris and Terrence's house with a small overnight bag, Kenji was already pulling into the driveway behind her. Alisha turned at the sound of his engine, her eyes narrowing even as something warm and traitorous loosened in her chest. Kenji. Iris appeared in the doorway with Carrington balanced on her hip. Terrence came up behind her, took one look at Kenji's expression and muttered, So much for optimism. Kenji ignored him and walked straight to Alisha. You're not staying here. Alisha lifted one eyebrow. Excuse me? You're staying at my house, Kenji said, his voice low but firm. The decision is non-negotiable. Terrence's brows shot up. Oh, that is a bold strategy. Iris gave a quiet hum, clearly entertained despite the seriousness of the situation. Let's see how this works out for him, Alisha should have argued. Any other day she would have reminded Kenji that nobody made decisions for her, least of all him. But there was something in his eyes, fear, protectiveness and a steadiness she had not seen from him in a long time, that made the fight slip out of her. She did not like being ordered around. She did, however, like the way he looked at her as if keeping her safe was the only thing in the world that mattered. Fine, she said, trying and failing to sound annoyed. But only because I don't feel like arguing with you in Iris's driveway. Kenji's shoulders dropped with visible relief. Thank you. Terrence pointed between them. Just so everybody is clear, we are still circling back to the part where Kenji created drama while giving speeches about not creating drama. Kenji finally looked at him. Can you give me one morning? I can, Terrence said, fighting a grin. But I am saving material. Alisha shook her head, but a small smile tugged at her mouth as Kenji reached for her bag. She let him take it. She let him open the passenger door for her. And even though everything around them was complicated and messy, she could not deny the quiet warmth that moved through her at the sight of him standing there, protective and certain. Kenji's house. Kenji's house was quiet when they arrived, the kind of quiet that made Alisha realize just how loud the last few hours had been. He carried her bag inside, locked the door behind them, and went straight to the kitchen like giving his hands something useful to do might keep him from hovering. Sit, he said, nodding toward the island. I'm fixing you something to eat. Alisha gave him a tired look. Do I get a vote in anything today? Kenji opened the refrigerator and glanced over his shoulder. You can vote on eggs or grilled cheese. Despite herself, she smiled. Grilled cheese. They talked while he cooked, not about Alonso at first, but about safe things. Carrington's latest habit of throwing her cup just to make Iris gasp. Terrence's dramatic complaints about fatherhood. The way life kept moving even when their hearts had been standing still. But eventually silence slipped in, and with it came the weight of everything they were trying not to say. Kenji set the plate in front of her and watched her take a few bites before his shoulders loosened. You're exhausted. I'm fine. You're about 10 seconds from falling asleep over that sandwich. Alisha tried to argue, but a yawn betrayed her. Kenji's expression softened. Come on, guest room. You need rest. He carried her bag down the hall and showed her the room, already neat, already waiting like he had been hoping for a reason to protect her there. Alisha barely managed to take off her shoes before sleep pulled her under. She woke to shouting. Alonso at the door. At first Alisha thought she had dreamed it. Then another voice cut through the house, louder and sharper, and her stomach dropped. Alonso. She grabbed her phone and rushed down the hall, her bare feet silent against the floor. The front door was open, and outside Kenji had Alonso pinned to the ground, one knee braced near his hip while Alonso struggled beneath him. Kenji! Alisha cried. Kenji looked up, breathing hard. Go back inside, Alisha. I already called the police, she said, voice shaking as she lifted the phone to her ear again. Alonzo stopped struggling long enough to glare at her. You called the police on me? You showed up here after threatening him, Alisha said. What did you think I was going to do? Kenji eased back, trying to let Alonzo up without giving him another reason to fight. The second Alonzo found his feet, he lunged. Kenji reacted on instinct. One hard defensive strike ended the attack before it could fully begin, and Alonzo dropped heavily to the ground, unconscious. For one terrible second, everything went silent. Alisha ran to Kenji's side, her eyes darting from his face to Alonzo on the ground. Are you hurt? No, Kenji said, though his hand trembled when he reached for hers. Stay back from him. Police arrived minutes later with an ambulance close behind. The officers separated everyone, took statements, and watched as the paramedics brought Alonzo around. He was disoriented, angry, and still shouting accusations, even as they checked him over. After hearing Alisha explain the earlier threat and Kenji describe Alonzo's arrival and attack, the officers placed Alonzo under arrest for trespassing, assault, communicating threats, and disorderly conduct. As they led him away, Alonzo looked back at Alisha, betrayal still burning in his eyes. Alisha did not flinch under the rage of his stare. She stayed beside Kenji, shaken but steady, her hand locked tightly in his. Still at Kenji's. A few days later, Iris and Terence sat in Kenji's living room, pretending they were not openly counting how many of Alicia's things had quietly migrated into the house. There was a cardigan over the back of the sofa, her favorite mug in the sink, a hair tie on the coffee table, and 3 pairs of shoes by the door that Kenji had not tripped over once. Terence glanced at Iris, then at Kenji. So are we calling this a temporary safety arrangement, or has Alisha accidentally moved in? Alisha nearly choked on her tea. I have not moved in, Iris lifted an eyebrow. Your robe is in his laundry room. That does not mean anything. It means laundry, Terence said. Laundry is serious. Kenji sat back, badly hiding a smile. Alisha caught it, and pointed at him. Do not look pleased. I'm not, he said. Everyone in the room stared at him until he gave up. Fine. I'm a little pleased, Iris laughed, and for the first time in days, the sound did not feel like a distraction from fear. It felt like life beginning to return. Something real. Later that night, after Iris and Terence had gone home and the house settled into quiet, Alisha stood in the hallway outside the guest room with her hand on the doorframe. Kenji came from his room in a t-shirt and sleep pants, stopping when he saw her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Kenji finally looked down, then back up at her. Can I ask you something? You can ask. His throat worked. Would you let me hold you tonight? Alicia's breath caught, but he lifted both hands slightly, careful not to crowd her. I'm not asking for anything else, he said quietly. I'm not proposing we solve everything tonight. After everything that happened today, I just need to hold on to something real, and you are the realest thing I know. The honesty in his voice slipped past every defense she had left. Alisha nodded. Okay. They ended up in his bed with the lights low, Kenji behind her, one arm wrapped around her waist like an anchor. Alisha let herself sink back against him, surprised by how safe it felt, how familiar, how right. For once her mind stopped racing. I love you, Kenji whispered into the quiet. Alisha turned carefully in his arms so she could see his face. I love you too. The words changed the room, not because they were new, but because neither of them was hiding from them anymore. Kenji searched her face in the dim light, his hand resting gently against her cheek. I spent so much time convincing myself that loving you was the thing that ruined us, he said softly. But it was not love that broke us, it was fear. Pride. Silence. I do not want to be silent with you anymore. Alicia's eyes filled, and she placed her hand over his. Then don't be, she whispered. Tell me the truth, even when it scares you. His thumb moved slowly along her skin. The truth is, I never stopped loving you. Not for one day, not even when I was trying to. The room seemed to narrow around them, the low light warming the edges of his face, the quiet hum of the house making everything feel suspended and fragile. Alisha leaned closer, her voice trembling but certain. I never stopped either. Kenji kissed her softly then, as if he were asking and answering at the same time. The kiss was tender at first, careful and reverent, carrying the weight of everything they had survived, and everything they were finally brave enough to admit. Alisha moved toward him, her arms slipping around his neck as the distance between them disappeared. Outside, the world remained still, but inside the room, the air changed. Warm, breathless, and full of promise. Kenji drew her closer, then pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, making sure she was still with him, still choosing this. He brushed his thumb along her cheek. Alisha, if we cross this line tonight, going slow is out the window. I need you to be sure. She held his gaze, steady and certain. I don't want to go slow, I want you. I want us, I want everything that means. Kenji's eyes softened with a tenderness that made her chest ache. Then let me spend the rest of my life showing you how important you are to me. Alisha answered by drawing him closer. His hands traveled over her body, reverencing her softness, her beauty. His tender kisses followed his hands, until he found the soft treasure between her thighs. She arched, and let out a moan of sheer pleasure. After a few moments he found his way back to her. He parted her legs and entered her. She inhaled sharply, holding her breath. Her body stiffened. Her fingers dug in his flesh. Baby, he said, his voice strained as he fought to maintain control. I am not fully in. I can stop if this is too much for you. She shook her head. No. As her body relaxed under him, he noticed her body surrendering to his, and drove deeper, slowly, gently, allowing her time to adjust to him. He whispered words of love and desire while waiting patiently for her body to accept all of him. She slowly began to arch her hips against him, reaching for that fine line where pain and pleasure intersect. He met her thrusts. He tried to be gentle at first, but her moans became the backdrop to his passion, and the realization that she was finally his made restraint impossible. She matched his thrust with a frenzy of her own, until she felt 1,000 little explosions travel through her. She held on to him, and cried out loud with pure pleasure. Kenji, no longer able or wanting to maintain control, gave one final thrust that released his own passion, accompanied by a groan that Alisha felt vibrate from the bottom of his stomach. Once their trembling subsided, they lay tangled in each other's arms, completely sedated by their love. I love you, Alisha, Kenji said, his voice still rough with emotion. I love you too, Kenji, she whispered. 3 months. Morning came softly, spilling pale gold across Kenji's bedroom, and finding them still tangled together beneath the sheets. For a while, neither of them moved. Alisha listened to the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek, and Kenji traced slow circles along her back, as if he was afraid she might disappear if he stopped touching her. You know, Kenji said quietly, Terence was not completely wrong. Alisha lifted her head. That is a dangerous sentence to say out loud. Kenji smiled, but his eyes stayed serious. About you being here, about your things being here, about this already feeling like home. Alisha grew still, the words settling over her with unexpected tenderness. Are you asking me to move in with you? No, he said, then sat up enough to look at her fully. I am asking you to stay. Move in, yes. But more than that, I am asking you not to leave again unless you want to. This house has felt like it was waiting for you since the day I bought it. Her throat tightened. Kenji. He reached for her hand and kissed her fingers. And while I am being honest, I do not want a long engagement either. Alisha blinked, then laughed softly. Engagement? Did I miss the part where you proposed? Kenji slipped out of bed, disappeared into the closet, and returned with a small velvet box in his hand. Alisha's laughter faded into stunned silence. I bought this before we broke up, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I kept it because some part of me never stopped believing I would get another chance to ask you right. He opened the box and lowered himself beside the bed, his gaze locked on hers. Alisha Majet, marry me. I do not want to waste any more time pretending I can live without you. I want you to be my wife now. Tears blurred her vision even as a laugh escaped her. You are impossible. Is that a yes? Alisha held out her hand, smiling through her tears. Okay? Kenji froze. Okay? Yes, Kenji. Okay, I will marry you. The ring slid onto her finger like it had been waiting there all along. By noon, Iris was crying, Terence was laughing, and Carrington was chewing on her fingers, unimpressed by whatever else was going on. By dinner, the wedding date was set for 3 months later because Kenji refused to hear anything about next year, next spring, or after things calmed down. Things are calm enough, he told them all, one arm wrapped around Alisha's waist. I lost her once. I am not scheduling my happiness 12 months out like a dentist appointment. Alisha laughed and leaned into him. 3 months, she agreed. But you are helping with every decision. Kenji kissed her temple. Anything you want. Alonso's day in court. Wedding planning carried them forward in a blur of venue visits, cake tastings, and Iris sending Alisha color palettes at unreasonable hours of the night. But beneath the excitement, Alonso's court date waited like a storm cloud on the edge of their happiness. Because Alonso was a first-time offender, his attorney negotiated a plea deal. If accepted, Alonso would receive probation, be ordered to remain at least 1,000 feet away from both Kenji and Alisha, and complete court-mandated counseling. Alisha tried to convince herself that would be enough. Kenji sat beside her in the courtroom, his hand covering hers, his thumb moving in slow, steady strokes over her ring finger. At the defense table, Alonso barely looked at the judge. He stared at Alisha instead, his face tight with resentment. When asked if he understood the terms of the plea, he answered yes, but there was no remorse in his voice, no regret, only anger pressed into a polite shape. Then his eyes dropped to Alisha's hand. The diamond caught the courtroom light. Alonso's expression changed instantly. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered, loud enough for the front row to hear. The judge looked over his glasses. Mr. Alvarez, do you have something to say? Alonso stood so abruptly that his chair scraped across the floor. Yeah, I do. She's sitting there acting like the victim, when she's the reason I'm here. She played me, lied to me, humiliated me, and now she's engaged to him like I was nothing. Beside Alisha, Kenji's body went rigid, but he didn't move. Alisha kept her gaze fixed forward, refusing to give Alonso the reaction he wanted. Sit down, Alonso's attorney hissed. But Alonso ignored him, his voice rising. No, I'm not sitting down. Everybody wants me to apologize, but for what? For being angry? For finding out the woman I cared about was making a fool of me while she ran back to her ex? He jabbed a finger toward Alisha. She should be sitting here, not me. That lying whore used me. Kenji stood then, stepping in front of Alisha, his body blocking her from Alonso's toxic rage. He wasn't just a spectator. He stood as her protector, his posture tense, coiled, ready to react, to defend, to destroy if necessary. Alisha sat frozen, shock rendering her silent and motionless, as the full weight of Alonso's fury bore down on her. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. The judge's expression hardened. Mr. Alvarez, the judge said, voice cold and controlled. Mr. Barris, control your client. I don't need controlling, Alonso shouted back. I want the world to see what that lying whore did to me. Suddenly, he lurched toward Alisha. Kenji moved to intercept him, but the deputies were faster, grabbing Alonso, restraining him, tackling him to the floor. Alonso struggled violently, desperate to get to her. The judge banged his gavel, the sound echoing over the screams of disbelief and shock that filled the courtroom. Get him out of here, the judge ordered, slamming his gavel again, as Alonso screamed a barrage of obscenities at Alisha, at Kenji, at anyone standing between him and his target. Even after he was dragged from the courtroom, his shouts echoed in the hallway. The judge called a 20-minute recess. Alonso's lawyer gathered his things and hurried after his client. Only when the threat was gone, did Kenji turn to Alisha. She was sitting exactly as she had been when Alonso first spoke, except her eyes were bright and distant, her body stiff, hands gripping the arms of her chair. Kenji forced himself to relax. He stepped back, knelt beside her and spoke softly. Alisha, look at me, you're okay, it's gonna be okay. I'm here, baby, you're safe. She looked at him, tears brimming in her eyes, and collapsed against him with a whimper, whispering his name. The fear in her face and voice reignited Kenji's anger, but he only held her, reassuring her that he would never let anyone hurt her again. After several minutes her trembling subsided, and he pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, before returning to his vigilant stance, waiting for the ordeal to end. When Alonso was brought back into the courtroom, he was in handcuffs, surrounded by 4 deputies and his lawyer. Though silent now, he never took his eyes off Alisha, his rage simmering just beneath the surface. Court was called to order. The judge began. This court was prepared to consider leniency based on your lack of prior record and your agreement to counseling. Your conduct today demonstrates that you accept no responsibility for your actions, and that you remain a threat to those you have harmed. Alonso's face drained of color. Your Honor, the plea agreement is rejected, the judge said. Based on the record before this court and your behavior in this courtroom, I am sentencing you to 5 years in prison." Alisha closed her eyes as the words landed. Kenji squeezed her hand, grounding her, reminding her that this chapter was ending, even if the ending was ugly. As the deputies removed Alonzo, he looked once more at the ring on Alisha's finger, then at Kenji. The anger was still there, and as the doors closed behind him, he let out a guttural sound that reverberated through the courtroom. Alisha exhaled a breath she felt she had been holding for months. Kenji leaned close and whispered, "It's over." She managed a weak but genuine smile, and together they walked out of the courtroom hand in hand, determined to put Alonzo, and this whole ordeal, behind them. The night before the wedding. The night before the wedding, Alisha sat cross-legged on Iris's guest bed, while Iris sprawled across the foot of it, with a glass of sparkling cider in one hand, and a stack of emergency wedding day supplies beside her. They were supposed to be checking the final list: rings, vows, dress, shoes, something old, something new. But somehow, they had ended up laughing until Alicia's stomach hurt over Terrence's attempt to practice walking Carrington down the aisle with a basket of flower petals. "He was so serious," Iris said, wiping tears from the corners of her eyes. "Like that baby was supposed to understand stage direction." Alisha laughed, then suddenly went still. The color drained from her face. "Alisha?" Iris sat up. "What's wrong?" Alisha pressed a hand over her mouth and bolted from the bed. Iris followed her into the bathroom, just in time to hear her get sick. When Alisha finally leaned back against the tub, pale and embarrassed, Iris crouched beside her and handed her a cool washcloth. "This has been happening for 2 weeks," Alisha admitted, pressing the cloth to her forehead. "Everything upsets my stomach. Coffee, perfume, chicken, that lemon candle you love. I think it is the stress of planning a wedding in 3 months." Iris went very still. Alisha noticed immediately. "Why are you looking at me like that?" "Like what?" Iris asked, too innocent to be trusted. "Like you just solved a crime." Iris tilted her head. "Have you been more tired than usual?" Alisha frowned. "I'm planning a wedding. Mood swings?" "Again, wedding. Certain smells making you want to fight somebody?" Alisha hesitated. "That lemon candle did personally offend me yesterday." "And when was your last period?" Iris asked. Alisha opened her mouth, then closed it. Her expression shifted from irritation to calculation to sudden panic. Iris nodded slowly. "That is not wedding stress, sweetheart. That is pregnancy." "No." Alisha shook her head immediately. "Absolutely not. Kenji and I are not having kids until year 3. "We said year 3. Iris burst out laughing. "Girl, you better start acting like year 3 came early, because you are pregnant." 20 minutes later, Iris had raided the bathroom cabinet, the emergency tote in her car, and somehow produced several pregnancy tests, like she had been waiting for this exact plot twist. Alisha stared at the row of tests on the counter, as the results appeared one after another. Positive, positive, positive. Alisha sank onto the closed toilet lid, one hand pressed to her mouth. "We were careful." Iris folded her arms and gave her a pointed look. "Were you?" Alisha started to answer, then stopped. A memory flashed through her mind. One particular night, 2 bottles of wine on the kitchen counter, soft music drifting through the house, and Kenji walking into the room looking entirely too good for any reasonable woman's judgment. Her cheeks warmed. There may have been one night. Iris's grin spread slowly. One night? Alisha covered her face with both hands. 2 bottles of wine. And Kenji was looking particularly fine that night. Iris leaned against the sink and laughed until she had to wipe her eyes. "Well, you can tell my goddaughter the story of the night she was conceived. I am sure she will appreciate the romance and the poor decision-making." Alisha lowered her hands, laughing despite the tears gathering in her eyes. "Your goddaughter?" "Obviously," Iris said. "I am claiming her now. Or him. But my spirit says girl. And my spirit has a strong track record." Alisha looked back at the tests, the shock slowly giving way to something softer and more fragile. Tomorrow she was marrying Kenji. Tomorrow they will be promising forever. And now, forever had arrived with a tiny impossible heartbeat she had not even known to listen for yet. "I have to tell him," Alisha whispered. Iris smiled and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Yes you do. But maybe wait until after he says his vows. We do not need that man fainting at the altar." The wedding day. The next day arrived, wrapped in soft sunlight and quiet anticipation. White roses lined the aisle, their petals spilling gently over gold-trimmed lanterns, while sheer fabric moved like clouds in the breeze. Friends and family filled the garden, dressed in warm colors that made the whole space feel like a sunset captured before its time. Kenji stood at the altar in a tailored black suit, but for once there was no guarded coolness in him. His eyes kept searching the end of the aisle, his hands clasped in front of him as if he could hold himself still by sheer force of will. Then the music changed, and Alisha appeared. Her dress moved around her like water, elegant and effortless, with delicate lace catching the light along her shoulders and sleeves. Iris walked behind her with tears already shining in her eyes, while Carrington toddled ahead with flower petals in both fists, dropping most of them in one determined clump halfway down the aisle. Terence leaned toward Kenji and whispered, "Do not faint." Iris said, "I am not allowed to carry two emotional people today." Kenji did not answer. He could not. The moment Alisha's eyes found his, everything else faded. The chairs, the music, the guests, even the nervous beat of his own heart. There was only her walking toward him, carrying every second chance he had ever prayed for. When she reached him, he took her hands like they were sacred. Their vows were not perfect or polished, they were better than that. They were honest. Kenji promised to love her out loud, to never let fear become silence again, and to spend every day proving that choosing her was the easiest truth of his life. Alisha promised to stay, to speak, to trust the love they had fought their way back to, and to build a life with him that made room for joy, forgiveness, and every dream still waiting for them. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Kenji did not rush the kiss. He held Alisha's face in both hands and kissed her with a tenderness that made the entire garden erupt in applause. Iris cried openly. Terence clapped the loudest. Carrington shouted something that sounded enough like, "Yay," for everyone to count it. The reception glowed late into the evening beneath strings of lights. There was dancing, laughter, cake smeared lightly on Kenji's jaw after Alisha pretended she was too classy for such behavior, and a toast from Terence that was equal parts heartfelt and reckless. Through it all, Kenji kept finding excuses to pull Alisha close, as if the word wife was still settling into his bones. The honeymoon. 2 days later, they landed in Santorini, Greece, where whitewashed villas climbed the cliffs, and the Aegean Sea stretched beneath them, in impossible shades of blue. Their suite opened onto a private terrace draped in bougainvillea, with a small table for breakfast, and a view that made Alisha stand completely still the first time she saw it. "This does not look real," she whispered. Kenji came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "It is real," he said against her temple. "So are we." For the first few days, they moved through the island like they were living inside a dream. They wandered narrow stone streets, ate dinner by candlelight, watched the sunset turn the sea copper and rose, and slept late with the balcony doors open to the sound of waves far below. But Kenji noticed what Alisha tried to hide. She pushed food around her plate more than she ate it. She turned pale whenever the smell of grilled fish drifted through a restaurant. One morning, she barely made it to the bathroom before getting sick. When she came back out, Kenji was sitting on the edge of the bed, concern written across his face. "Baby, this is more than travel stomach. Tell me what is going on." Alisha looked at him for a long moment. "I am fine, you worry too much," she said with a reassuring smile. Kenji stared at her. "You sure?" he asked skeptically. "Yes," she said. "I am fine, my husband." He smiled, kissed her on the forehead and said okay. The next morning, while Kenji was in the shower, she lined the pregnancy tests along the bathroom counter beside the sink. All of them. Every bright, undeniable positive. She sat on the bed afterward, twisting her wedding ring around her finger, listening as the water shut off. The bathroom door opened. Silence followed. Then Kenji appeared in the doorway, towel around his waist, eyes wide, one of the tests held carefully in his hand like it might vanish. "Alisha," he breathed. "Are we having a baby?" Her eyes filled instantly. "Yes." For half a second, he did not move. Then joy broke across his face so completely that Alisha started laughing through her tears before he even reached her. Kenji crossed the room, dropped to his knees in front of her, and pressed both hands gently to her stomach. "Hi," he whispered, voice cracking. "I am your daddy, and I already love you more than I know how to explain." Alisha covered his hands with hers. "You are not upset?" Kenji looked up at her like she had asked the strangest question in the world. "Upset? Alisha, I have spent months trying to marry you as fast as legally possible. You think I am going to be upset because we made a family?" Before Alisha could answer, he was on his feet, searching for his phone. "Who are you calling?" she asked, laughing. "Everybody." He called Iris first. Before Iris could say anything, Terence got on the line next and congratulated them, before asking if this meant Kenji was finally done creating dramatic life events for the calendar year. Carrington babbled into the phone, which Kenji decided was clearly her blessing. After that, he called his family, then hers, then several people Alisha was not entirely sure needed to know before breakfast. By the time he finished, he had already opened a notes app titled Baby Plans and begun making lists. "Kenji," Alisha said, peeking over his shoulder, "did you just write crib research, college fund, pediatrician and baby-proof stairs on the same list?" "We need to be prepared," he said seriously. Alisha kissed his cheek. "We are on our honeymoon." "Exactly. Plenty of time to plan." Forever begins. That evening they walked hand in hand, along a quiet cliffside path, as the sun lowered over the Aegean. The sky turned lavender and gold, and the sea below caught every color like it was holding the day gently, before letting it go. Kenji kept one hand linked with hers, and the other resting protectively at the small of her back. Every few steps, his gaze drifted to her stomach, still flat beneath her sundress, and every time it did, wonder softened his face all over again. Alisha laughed quietly. "You keep looking at me like I am carrying a miracle." Kenji stopped walking and turned her toward him. "You are." The wind lifted the ends of her hair, and the last light of day warmed her face. Alisha looked at the man in front of her, the man she had lost, found, forgiven, and chosen, and felt peace settle deep inside her. "I used to think love was supposed to be easy," she said. "But maybe sometimes it has to teach us who we are before it lets us keep it." Kenji lifted her hand and kissed her wedding ring. "Then I am grateful for every lesson that led me back to you." She smiled, tears shining softly in her eyes. "And now," Kenji drew her close, careful and certain. "Now we love each other on purpose, every day. No running, no silence, no letting fear speak louder than us." Alisha rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm beneath her ear. Somewhere below them, waves broke against the rocks, endless and sure. "I love our life already," she whispered. Kenji held her closer as the sun slipped beneath the horizon. "So do I." They continued down the path together, husband and wife, soon to be parents, and two people who had finally learned that the love meant for them was not behind them after all. It was here, in their hands, in their vows, in the tiny future growing between them, and in every step they took toward forever.